back. How's it going? I'm Nick Lanciani alongside Colby Kephart and Connor Keith, and we're about to bring you the Down the Frozen River podcast for this week.
Hi, all our listeners. That was me, Colby.
Colby throwing a little wave in case you want to wave back. So we haven't done this in a little while. The standings update, not the podcast, I should clarify. So we're going to go with a little standings update and see how this goes.
Facepalm.
With all kinds of things that Colby and Connor definitely want to talk about. In the Atlantic Division, the Florida Panthers currently lead the standings with 70 points on the season. The Detroit Red Wings are second with 64 points, tied with the Boston Bruins with 64 points. But the Red Wings have...
advantage?
Yeah, they have an advantage based on overtime losses, regulation plus overtime wins, what have you. Tampa Bay Lightning, 4th place, 62 points. Montreal Canadiens, 5th place, 58 points. Ottawa Senators, 6th place, 56 points. The Buffalo Sabres are in 7th with 48 points. And actually, last in the entire league, the Toronto Maple Leafs, 8th place in the Atlantic Division, 47 points. A 19-25-9 record in 53 games played. Anything surprise you guys?
They belong at the bottom, and I said this from the beginning. I thought they would be there, I guess, faster. They just don't have many offensive weapons, and then obviously the big trade that just happened, but we'll get to that a little later.
Connor, care to comment?
I'm intrigued by Detroit still. Personally, I don't think they're as good as their position in the standings implies. So they just find ways to win though, regardless of what the stats say. So that goes both ways. It'll be interesting to see how all that pans out. Should they qualify for the playoffs? Although I think Colby has his first hot take of the day.
Well, I'm just going to jump in and say maybe they didn't need Mike Babcock after all of these years. Anyway, Colby, you were saying?
I was just going to go on a limb, and I think the reason that they're winning the games is Dylan Larkin is kind of taking a little bit of the weight off Datsyuk and Zetterberg. Mm-hmm. And it's also nice having Mrazek in goal. So as much as, I'm kind of with you, not thinking they're as good as their spot is, but I like the team a little bit, and I think Larkin playing the way he is really helping the team. And now you're watching Zetterberg and Datsyuk hook up for winners and stuff like that all the time now. So it's good to see that team get going again.
And shifting to the Metropolitan Division in the Eastern Conference, after I read these off, go to Connor with the expertise. But the Washington Capitals currently lead the Metropolitan Division, 84 points on the season. I just want to call it the Met Division, because, let's shorten it. It's such a long name. Sorry, that's one of the things that irks me since, looking at NHL.com and all that jazz. Anyway, this has been Nick's Rant of the Day. Second in the Metropolitan Division, the New York Rangers, 67 points. Third, the New York Islanders, 64 points. The Pittsburgh Penguins sit fourth, just outside of division spot, but clinch a wildcard spot, which I'll address the other wildcard in just a moment, with 61 points. New Jersey Devils are fifth in the division with 61 points as well. The Philadelphia Flyers are sixth in the Metropolitan Division with 57 points on the season. The Carolina Hurricanes sit seventh with 57 points as well, but one more game played, so Philly gets a tiebreaker there. And the Columbus Blue Jackets are in eighth with 50 points on the season. Now, of course, I said that the Pittsburgh Penguins hold the wild card, one of the wild card spots, the second wild card, and the Tampa Bay Lightning from the Atlantic Division hold the other wild card spot in the Eastern Conference. We now go to Connor with his hot takes on this division.
Well, I don't know if they're hot takes so much as just stating the obvious, I think. The wild card in the Eastern Conference is just going to be an incredible race going down to the wire in the next couple of months. You could argue that all the way down to Ottawa in the Eastern Conference has a chance at the wild card spot. I'm fully aware Ottawa might be a little bit of a stretch, but the points are there. They're only trailing, 56 to 61. They're only down by 5 points, so really it's not that big a differential. So I think that's just going to be a really good race going down to the finish there. I'm intrigued by the Islanders of late, though. They have not been playing well the last week, 2 weeks, give or take, and they need to figure something out fast because they are falling in the division quickly.
Going on the Islanders for a second, just looking at the play of Halak, I understand he was out for a little bit there, but he's returned and he doesn't look like the same goalie. Mm-hmm. This team is giving up goals, giving up easy goals. They got Johnny Boychuk back, which is good to see because, he's a big part of that defense. I think he got a goal. I think it was last night. So maybe they'll turn it around. Did they win last night?
I can't remember for last night. I know that over the weekend they were so funny because they lost by a pretty significant margin one night. Then the next night, I know it was Edmonton that came into town, and they put 7 on Edmonton. And it's just, the offense can't be that streaky. And then, like you brought up with Yarrow, the goaltending and the defense can't be that streaky either. So it's they need to find some solid ground.
Well, with Yarrow, they've been actually playing Grice a little more.
True.
And yes, if you were wondering, the Islanders beat the Kings last night 5-2.
So yeah, that's a good win for them. I think they'll turn it around. I think they'll make a decent push here at the end.
Yeah.
Boychuk, Casey Cizikas, Anders Lee, Kyle
Tavares
Clifford,
had a goal.
John Tavares, Milan Lucic, Travis Hamonic. Lots of goals in that game. Not nearly as many as the Kings and the Bruins the other day, but we're going to move on from that. In the Western Conference, the Central Division is currently led by the Chicago Blackhawks, who faced the Dallas Stars last night. Patrick Eaves had a first-period hat trick, and then Chicago almost came back in the third, but, Kari Lehtonen stood tall in net for the Stars. So that was an exciting game, but moving on. Chicago leads the division, 76 points. Dallas Stars, right on their tails, second in the division, 75 points on the season. St. Louis Blues, third in the division with 69 points. Colorado Avalanche sit fourth with 60 points. Nashville Predators sit fifth with 58 points. Minnesota Wild sit sixth, try saying that 10 times fast, with 56 points. And the Winnipeg Jets currently sit seventh, dead last in the Central Division, with 51 points on the season in 54 games played. Go Colby with his hot takes.
Well, I mean, earlier in the week, I released the article about the Wild. I believe they lost again last night. So they're still dropping games. That's now 7 straight. You wonder what they're really, if they're going to turn around, if they're going to make a push for the playoffs. But at this point, I don't think so. I think Winnipeg and Minnesota might as well try to pack it in on their season here. It's just a tough division to come back and try to pull something out of.
Yeah, because I think both, even Minnesota right now, they'd be 4 points out of the third place division, but still, I think just given the competition, it'd be a little bit of a different story. I think for the Central Division, for me, the most exciting thing is going on at the top between Chicago and Dallas, which was made evident last night in the 4-2 game. Because really that game was overall fairly even in my opinion. Dallas killed the first period, Chicago killed the third, and both were pretty even in the second, holding each other scoreless in the second period. That race in the next 2 months to try to clinch the top spot in the division, both of them have their eyes on a President's Trophy against Washington. It's just going to be another incredible race that I think that 2-horse race is going to be a lot of fun to watch.
And just to backtrack for a moment, the Washington Capitals and Minnesota Wild result was a 4-3 game. Alex Ovechkin scored his 14th hat trick of his career. There were a lot of hat tricks last night. Jordan Eberle had
first
one,
one since 2013.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the President's Trophy race between really Washington and
and Chicago.
And Dallas. Granted, the Capitals have 84 points on the season so far, and the Blackhawks and Stars seem to be swapping first place every other night, and they're almost
Chicago's had the top
almost
spot
10
in the
points
division for about a month and a half now. But
that's not
Dallas,
impressive.
Chicago also has multiple games over Dallas played right now.
which is why it's not as impressive, because Dallas is kept in the hunt. Unlike the Pacific Division, which seems to be hurting itself in the hunt all the time, the Los Angeles, actually, you know what? Backtrack a moment. California Division is really what it's become, because the top 3 spots are all California teams. The Los Angeles Kings, 67 points. San Jose Sharks, 61 points. That's number 1 and 2. Anaheim Ducks in third with 60 points on the season. Vancouver Canucks, 56 points, 4th place. Arizona Coyotes, 5th place, 54 points. Calgary Flames, 6th place, 53 points. And the Edmonton Oilers, with Connor McDavid back in the lineup and doing very well with points per game, 49 points, dead last in the Pacific Division. What is it going to take for any of these teams to really kind of get the separation that they want, given that the split isn't that grand?
I think you can prepare to see Vancouver drop off a little more. They just released a bunch of new injuries the team is facing, so there's not much left there. Adler's out again, so I think Vancouver's going to drop off a little more. I think Anaheim will start to pull back up, probably end up taking over that second division spot.
I agree, and they're only down a point. I think the most disappointing thing for me seeing this season happen has been Arizona. I don't know. The stats weren't there all season. We probably knew that it probably wasn't going to happen anymore, but they just had a magic. They had a spark. It was a fun team to watch. And then, whatever reason it may be, we'll just call it what it is officially, the John Scott trade to Montreal. I think that really just took something out of them, and things have been downhill since then. They were going downhill a little bit before then, but you could argue that they just needed the rest going to the All-Star break. But I think that him leaving and that whole thing going down just sort of squelched that fire, that flame that Arizona had going on, which is really disappointing because they were having a fun season to watch.
See, I would disagree. I'd think that the Arizona Coyotes were a lot like when Matt Duchene came into the league with the Colorado Avalanche. They always seem to get off to a fast start at the beginning of the season, have a great October, an excellent November, decent December. I'll look at that for alliteration. But then they'd really fall off in the second half of the season, and they show that they were the team that they really are. Now, they're still struggling to be the team that they want to be currently, but the Coyotes don't surprise me. At the end of the day, with all the moves they made, all the young talent they brought in, I think this is kind of to be expected.
The beauty of that division, though, is the minute you even get a spark and get this thing back going again, they are right back in the race. They are right back trying to compete. I don't think the Ducks are going to fall off, but the Sharks, it depends on what you get each night. I think that Arizona still has a chance to overtake the Sharks and get the third spot.
I mean, you got to think, even if they don't make the playoffs this year, playoffs were not in their game plan. They were not thinking that they were going to be in the playoffs. These young kids, and Domi and Duclair, you give them another season or two, and imagine what they could be. You hope they avoid the sophomore slump. But
The next Duchene, Landeskog, and
See,
McKinnon.
that's
Similar model.
Yeah.
I don't want to poke holes in that, though, but we've got the same team we've been saying that about last year in Calgary, and that's not going so hot up there.
Yeah, but they did
It's
have
a
the
bit of a different
sophomore slump.
situation.
Yeah, they did have the sophomore slump with Johnny Gaudreau a little bit. Monahan dropped off a little bit. And then, they kind of got a big ego, I felt like, when they brought in the players they did, Frolik, Dougie Hamilton. They thought they were going to be the next great thing, and it obviously hasn't worked out. Goaltending issues, whatever it may be.
Yeah, if
And
you
they
want
just
to
had a
compare,
goaltender go down last night.
if you want to compare the Flames and the Coyotes had a quick transition in terms of we need to figure out how to reinvent our game. And the Flames, this has been a bit of a longer process. I mean, they've still picked some of those guys from the 2012 draft, 2013 draft, that they're still developing within their system. Coyotes, it's kind of been, all right, can we get them and make them help be an immediate impact? And ultimately, you're going to see Strome coming up within the next couple of seasons.
But that's the thing. They were looking for the identity, and I think Duclair and Domi kind of brought them their identity. Yes, they had players like Doan and Hansel already there, but I think that style of play was built around these two guys, and it's really working out for them. And obviously, having the anchor in Oliver Ekman-Larsson back there is really helping. He's really contributed both offensive and defensively.
Absolutely.
Good points, as well as the fact that they had stuff to move to get the pieces that they've acquired, whereas Calgary was a bit weaker before.
That Keith Yandel trade is looking kind of nice.
Well, yeah, unless you're the New York Rangers.
Yeah.
In the wild card hunt in the Western Conference, Colorado has the first wild card spot, 60 points. Nashville Predators have the second wild card spot, which would mean that by default, 5 teams from the Central Division would be going to the 2016 Stanley Cup playoffs,
Which is what
we
we
expected.
all said in the start of the year.
with an exception or two. I mean, I don't think anyone picked Colorado.
Excuse me, I did.
Realistically is what I meant.
If you want to go back to that first podcast, I definitely had Colorado making the playoffs.
Minnesota, 2 points away from tying Nashville. Same thing for Vancouver. Arizona's 4 points away. Realistically, Calgary's still in the battle. Winnipeg's still in the battle. But ultimately, who's it going to come down to?
To qualify?
For a
the
wild
wi-
card.
for the wild card.
battle.
I would love to see Minnesota hop in there, just because I love their battles in the playoffs.
You got a big game coming up against the Chicago Blackhawks in the Stadium
well,
Series.
That's the thing. You never know. They can't find a way to beat them in a series ever. So, I love
They can take
watching
them
their
deep in the long
playoff battles with Colorado a few years ago. Chicago seems to always get the best of them, but I just love watching them in the playoffs.
I think that we've got our wild cards now. I don't see Minnesota pulling it together personally.
You think Nashville's going to hold on then?
Not particularly, but I don't think Minnesota can jump them. Which is why, in the same turn though, that whole goal is going to be getting that first wild card spot because I don't care. Yeah, I don't care if it's the Blackhawks or the Stars that ends up with that top spot. But regardless of how good the Kings have been, I don't want to see them in my first round. I want the Kings, and I'll take my chances there.
Maybe every team needs a cheerleader, like Matt Barkowski's mom for the Vancouver Canucks. I mean, they're just outside of the wild card spot, but if they found a way to use that energy and provide some extra oomph in their lineup, I mean, who knows? Because I think everyone's underestimating the Canucks, given how no one saw the season going the way that they've been going this year. If you look at what Jim Benning did in the offseason,
Or what he did.
what was he thinking?
I have no
is
idea.
what would be the first thing to come to mind. But at the same time, how are they where they are? I mean, they're in the Pacific
Sedins.
Division technically, but still, how are they where they are in the Western Conference? Still on the hunt for a wild card spot?
Sedins and Ryan Miller. I
Who's
mean,
been hurt here and there?
Yeah, I honestly don't know. I don't understand. Bo Horvat, I got to give a lot of credit to him. He's doing really good for.
Ever since that first game against Carolina, he has woken back up, and they are moving.
Well,
Well, he is at least. Maybe not the Canucks, in my opinion.
Taking all that into consideration, let's talk a little trade talk. Coming up at the end of the month, February 29th. That's right, it's a leap year, so hopefully you all remember that.
It's an election year and a Summer Olympics, guys. Every time.
Connor has 12 million things on his calendar.
There's just
I'm
no.
not
I'm
kidding.
just, it's just
So-
how you remember this stuff.
So if you ever have any questions ever about what's going on in the year, he'll know. But Monday, February 29th is the trade deadline. Before the deadline, there's normally a few big deals. On Tuesday of this week, the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Ottawa Senators, I'd say they made just a very, very minuscule transaction. Wouldn't you agree? You know, only 9 players involved. That's not that big
only
a deal.
9 players. I
Yeah, and a pick.
think the hope was to spark everything.
The Ottawa Senators acquired Dion Phaneuf, Cody Donaghy, Matt Fratton, Casey Bailey, and Ryan Rupert from the Toronto Maple Leafs in exchange for Jared Cowan, Milan Michalek, Colin Greening, Tobias Lindberg, and a 2017 second-round pick in the NHL entry draft, which was, by the way, announced the other day, will be held in Chicago at the United Center in June 2017. But I want to know, what's the impact of this deal for both teams and for the outlook in terms of league-wide? What might be the next domino to fall? What other teams might try to do?
But this is the thing. Okay, Ottawa just took on I don't know the exact terms of Phaneuf's, but it was a
It's
ridiculous.
about $7 million to
Yeah.
the 2021 season.
Yeah, that is a ridiculously long term. A lot of money for someone. And if you want to look at his first few games, hasn't really
As a
proven
pylon?
much. Yeah, he has the ability. He has the ability to hit. He's supposed to be a decent leader, but I don't see them benefiting from that. You give up Jared Cowan, who is kind of young, so I don't really know what the hopes were other than the power play goals that Phaneuf brings. I think it says something like he had 7 on the year, so
That's decent.
it you don't really know. I just think being able to take on a long term and that much money is going to become interesting in this trade deadline. Maybe someone will start trading for these longer contract players.
For Toronto, we know that they're now the last place team in the league. But is this absolutely chips are all on the table, giving up on this season, sell everybody, and get Austin Matthews?
I would say so. They're facing a few injury issues. Not trying to make excuses for him, but they didn't really bring much back, in my opinion. Much that can play now, that is. You have Cowan and Michalek. Okay, Michalek hasn't really done anything the past few seasons. Cowan still young, so yeah, that's maybe something you could develop into your maybe a top 2, top 4. Ottawa's been trying to get him to step up and play those roles, and it really wasn't working out. So maybe change location can help him, but you didn't really bring in much to fill the hole, in my eyes, of Dion Phaneuf.
And staying on the topic of Toronto, you didn't know, bet you didn't know, this podcast is going to be all Maple Leafs. TSN's Bob McKenzie and Darren Dreger have both indicated that the Toronto Maple Leafs are no longer number 1 in the race for Steven Stamkos if Tampa Bay Lightning are choosing to trade him. Currently, that position may or may not be ultimately held by the Buffalo Sabres.
Whoop! Yeah, Dreger didn't come out and say that it was directly the Sabres. They just said he kind of hinted that Austin Matthews was not going to attract Steven Stamkos. Why would Stamkos want to go to an organization who they don't really have many current top players? He would be the center of their focus. You have all the media issues, and there's just no one there, really.
Can I sum that up? If you want to win now, you have to have a team.
Yeah. And I think that's what Stamkos is going to look for here. He wants to be the highest paid player in the league, and he wants to win a championship. Let's face it, that's pretty much everyone's goal, I guess. But
Some would question whether or not he showed up or why he
Yeah.
didn't show up in the Stanley Cup final last year.
Yeah, you could argue that. I mean, there was players who played well, but he had a decent series going up, and it was just the finals where he kind of seemed to disappear a little bit. I think he might have had one goal in that series. But the reason Buffalo became the number one was because we have the players in place. We have Ryan O'Reilly, we have Jack Eichel, we have Sam Reinhart, and we have even Evander Kane if you want to go down that road. Those are players we can put around him that can help him out, and so that making us a top candidate in Bob McKenzie's eyes.
Yet the Sabres themselves are facing the issue of, do we trade people or do we not trade people?
Yeah.
You discussed that Tim Murray is interested in the idea of selling, but how much of a sellout will the Sabres be on February 29th?
Yeah, the issues that they would run into, they'd have to move Molson's contract. He's getting paid like $5 million, and he's still got like 3 years left. It's not worth it. He's not doing much, so you have to move him. There was another talk about moving Bogosian because he's got a decent contract on him. I'm not a big fan of moving Bogosian. I like him. I like his style of play, but it's something you'd have to change. And they're talking, if you really are going to do this, you're going to have to lock him up long term, and then you could run into cap issues trying to re-sign Sam Reinhart or Jack Eichel. So there could be issues that Tim Murray has to face if Stamkos really decides he wants to come there, even if it is a testing of free agency.
So bottom line, we're all excited to see what happens because at this point we could consider it a drama.
Well,
I mean, could someone write a play about this or something?
Well,
Get a little Shakespearean
I
going?
think this is the first time we're going to see a big free agency. I mean, last year it wasn't that big. Not many that big names there. And this year there's a lot of bigger names: Eric Stahl, Andrew Ladd, Stamkos, just players that could be.
If Stamkos tests the waters, everyone's going to be a free agent or want to be a free agent or just going to be demanding to be bought out. So they can be a free agent. Also in the kind of big deal category, although this isn't really a trade, but the Montreal Canadiens are downplaying the status of Carey Price, but Hockey Twitter has been very active in hinting, if not suggesting, or very merely speculating, that Carey Price might be done for the rest of the 2015-2016 season. What does this mean for the Montreal Canadiens? How does that impact whether or not they're buyers or sellers on the trade deadline? And better yet, first, why don't you tell me, will the Canadiens be buyers or sellers? What do you think their outlook for the rest of the year is?
I think they're honestly planning on being buyers, and I think that's why they're not releasing. They're not letting everyone know that Carey Price is not returning. There's been a lot of speculation that he's not going to return, but their team is not letting anyone know, so they can bring in these names and be like, yes, eventually at some point I will play with Carey Price. So that's a little sketchy idea. I'm not a really big fan of that strategy. But if they do become sellers, I wonder who you're really going to move. I mean, there's a lot of speculation of PK Subban. They're not really liking him again. You have the veteran D in Markov. He's up there in age. Does someone really want to take him for the experience? There's just a lot of things there that could come into effect.
And finally, this brings us to Connor's favorite portion of the podcast, the schedule portion. Why? Because he loves to talk about what his game of the day will be. So on Friday, today technically, when we recorded this, the Montreal Canadiens are traveling to the Buffalo Sabres to take on the Buffalo Sabres. Wow, what a surprise.
Makes sense.
Los
Good
Angeles
job.
Kings will be in New York to take on the Rangers. That game will be caught on NHL Network in the United States if you're interested in taking a look at the Rangers and the Kings. Good old East-West interplay. Pittsburgh Penguins taking on the Carolina Hurricanes in Raleigh, North Carolina. Colorado Avalanche taking on the Detroit Red Wings in Detroit. Nashville Predators taking on the Tampa Bay Lightning in Tampa. St. Louis Blues taking on the Florida Panthers. And the Calgary Flames are taking on the Arizona Coyotes. That's 7 games on the docket for Friday. And Connor has his game of the day prediction.
Yeah, there are a lot of good games today, but I ended up going with the Nashville-Tampa Bay game just because of, we already talked about it, that wild card race, not necessarily between them since they're opposing conferences, but both of them want to get out of that first spot to get away from either Washington for Tampa Bay's side or Dallas and or Chicago, however that ends up playing out, get away from those guys. So I think that both teams have things that they want to do tonight.
And Saturday, if you like watching hockey, there will be 10 games on any type of thing that you can imagine, internet, TV, radio, illegal streaming online, what have you. The New Jersey Devils traveling to the Wells Fargo Center, taking on the Philadelphia Flyers. I just had to make sure I was right with that stadium. I almost said something from years ago. Anyway, the Boston Bruins taking on the Minnesota Wild in Minnesota. Toronto Maple Leafs taking on the Vancouver Canucks in what I'm assuming will be Hockey Night in Canada, but NHL.com doesn't tell me that anymore. So if that's on CBC at 7 p.m. tomorrow night and you can catch it, great. If it's not, I'm sorry. Don't tell me I'm wrong, because I honestly don't know.
He doesn't like knowing he's wrong.
The Nashville Predators, and you're maybe right, Connor. Anyway, we'll find out. Deal with him later. Nashville Predators taking on the Florida Panthers, continuing their travels in the state of Florida. New York Islanders taking on the Carolina Hurricanes. Ottawa Senators taking on the Columbus Blue Jackets. Washington Capitals taking on the Dallas Stars in what will be a big matchup from a points standing-wise perspective. Not in terms of they're both in the same conference, but in terms of these are teams that could be, as we said, going for the Presidential Trophy hunt. President's Trophy hunt. Anaheim Ducks taking on the Chicago Blackhawks. NHL Network, 8:30 p.m. if you're interested in watching that in the United States. Winnipeg Jets taking on the Edmonton Oilers in what will probably be the second half of Hockey Night in Canada at 10 p.m. on CBC, Eastern Standard Time. Connor's pick for Saturday, does he have one yet?
Not yet. I'm looking over your shoulder just to get another idea of the schedule. I know I just
reading
went
my
with,
handwriting.
I know. I know I went with Nashville today, but that Nashville-Florida game could also be another one where Nashville wants to sort of start getting their season back in the right direction. But
So you're saying
we shall see.
if they lose tonight, then you'll probably pick them again tomorrow to see.
We shall see.
And on Sunday, Colby, you get to talk about any game you want in just a moment. I know you're itching at the bit there. Sunday, the Arizona Coyotes taking on the San Jose Sharks. Or is that supposed to be yesterday's game? I forget if I said that. My apologies. Sunday, the Colorado Avalanche taking on the Buffalo Sabres. Los Angeles Kings taking on the New Jersey Devils. Boston Bruins taking on the Detroit Red Wings in what will be NBC's Game of the Week, kind of. I mean, that's a 3:30 p.m. start time. So if you're used to waking up at noon for Game of the Week, you get a couple of extra hours to sleep in. St. Louis Blues taking on the Tampa Bay Lightning, and finally the Philadelphia Flyers taking on the New York Rangers in what will be on NBCSN at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Again, all times are in Eastern Standard Time because that's where we are as a team. 5 games on the docket for Sunday. Connor's got his pick, and then Colby can talk about whatever he wants.
I mean, I don't want to stick in Florida so much. The Tampa Bay Tampa
Whoa.
game, but I also I am liking the Boston Detroit game.
The return of Grigorenko
Oh,
and
that's right. That's
Zadorov
right.
to Buffalo.
See, Colby puts up a valid opinion.
Are they really going to be in the lineup, though?
I think Grigorenko's been in the lineup just about every night. On another little off-topic note, I was looking at the Winnipeg-Edmonton game from Saturday. I believe you have. Yes. That could be interesting, as I just learned Andre Pavlik has been taken off the IR, and they set Connor Hellebuyck back down. So there's a little bit of injury news. Maybe Pavlik could get a start.
Look at Colby breaking the news right here on air.
I don't think he's really breaking anything. I mean, I was just took a moment there to think about Jake Allen in the St. Louis Blues. They keep saying that he's almost ready to go, and
he's
then
not.
he's not. And then they keep saying, I mean, it's been the same story in Winnipeg with Pavlik, it seems.
Yeah, but except for the Blues are still winning.
Yes, but I
Well.
can now confirm he has been taken off IR.
There's that. You know what's funny? The other night I dreamt that there was, and I'm pretty sure it's a dream, because if it wasn't, then I apologize to whatever it was that said, talk about us on the podcast. But I dreamt that some company said, hey, give us a shout out. So if that was you in my dream, that's your shout out. If not, this has been this week's edition of the Down the Frozen River podcast. For Connor Keith, Colby Kephart, I'm Nick Lanciani. We'll see you next time right here on downthefrozenriver.com.